Hello and welcome back to Post Sports Live. I'm your host, Jonathan Forsythe, and joining me on the set, as always, LaVar Arrington, Dan Steinberg, and Jason Reid. We're a couple minutes late in getting started. Thanks for sticking with us. How's everybody on this quick Tuesday? Quick one word. How you doing?
Yep.
Fine. Dan, laughing.
I'm All-American over here.
That's more than one word.
Jay, how you doing, man? You're doing good. We got a lot to talk about. This is our first show since the Redskins named Jay Gruden the new head coach, so we're going to get into what are the realistic expectations for the team. We'll talk about the coaching staff, too, the Haslett factor. McVeigh, is he going to become the offensive coordinator? Whether or not that's a good idea. We'll talk about the NFL championship weekend, which is just a doozy of a couple games. Arguably the four best teams in the NFL this year playing this weekend, as it should be. It rarely turns out that way, but we'll offer bold predictions for that. And we'll talk about the Wizards coming off a big win last night. Nene was back in the starting lineup. We'll talk about his importance to the team and how Whitman can sort of manage him going forward to guard against re-injuring that Achilles. I want to start the show with, let's hear from Jay Gruden from his press conference last week at Redskins Park, and then we'll come out. Jason, I'll ask you a question on the other side.
I don't think finding a great coach and coaching staff is going to be difficult. It's finding the right ones that fit what I want to do and what the players want to do.
All right, Jason, I want to start the conversation based off of our colleague Thomas Boswell's column today and basically sort of tempering expectations. So, he looked at the teams that have ever gone 3-13 in the history of the NFL, averaged out for the next 2 years 13-19. What are the realistic expectations for Jay Gruden in year one with the Redskins?
Well, I don't think you can really look at history when you're talking about these types of situations because every situation is different. I mean, I remember once, someone wrote about how you never had a rookie quarterback lead a team to the playoffs. Well, Griffin did it, and so did Luck. So I don't really get hung up on history. What I get hung up on is, okay, what are they going to do with this roster? Right. I mean, you got to have major work done in the defensive backfield. You need at least one more inside linebacker. Are they going to pay Brian Orakpo what he may want? I wouldn't do it. So you're going to need at least, you may need another rush linebacker. Bowen did not have a great year. Did he just have a bad year? Or are you saying maybe it's time to go another direction there? Jarvis Jenkins played better later in the year, but still he hasn't shown he's more than a guy yet. So before I get hung up on the history, let me look at the roster, and I see a roster that needs major work. I see things offensively with the quarterback. He clearly had limitations this year. He's got to. I mean, I don't know how much you want me to get into this, but the bottom line is the best thing that I won't know what I really think of this team until I see what type of changes they make. But I don't get too hung up on the history part of it.
So what about you? The numbers don't lie, do they, Dan?
I mean, that was an interesting column by Boz, but when you say 13 and 19, that's over 2 years.
Yep.
If it's 4 wins the first year and 9 the second, I think that a lot of people would say, hey, that's pretty good. So I think when you're talking about the realistic expectations for year one, I think for the fan base, it's improvement. It's looking, again, like a credible, National Football League team that is not going to be embarrassed repeatedly over the course of a season. I mean, I think that's one, and I think the other big one is, and I understand it's a lot more complicated. Jason's absolutely right. But I think when you're talking about expectations, when you bring in an offensive guy who himself is a former quarterback, one of the expectations is that Robert Griffin III is going to play a hell of a lot better next year than he did this year.
LaVar, what is your take on expectations and what's realistic for Jay Gruden in year one?
I think much like my alma mater at Penn State, I think this team needs a figurehead. I think they need someone who can unite the owner, the GM, the coaches, the players, the community, the media. For some strange reason, I get the feeling that Jay Gruden is not a Jim Zorn where you feel good about Jim Zorn as a person, but you're looking at him like, dude is a pushover, or where are we going to go with this guy? I really believe he has the tools. He has the DNA to be a really fine coach as a head coach. But I think the first thing you have to focus in on year one, year two, and to be honest with you, if it goes right in those years, into the third year, is being more of a figurehead. There has been such a disconnect. There has been so many things awfully wrong in so many other areas that I think matter so much more than wins and losses, that that should be the main focus. If I were to say to the fans, what do you need to focus in on? Focus in on, is there an attempt to reconnect, to revitalize the relationships? I think I think if Jay
Gruden or is that Bruzel?
I think if Jay Gruden is smart, he will take the initiative to begin to repair and restore. And I think that's more important, because belief is the strongest ingredient to success. And so if you are getting the belief back, if you're restoring something where it hasn't been there or it's lost, whatever it may be, I think that's what we need to look for in the first few years. And Mike did a great job of breaking it up and destroying it.
Right.
So if you ask if it's Jay Gruden, I think certainly Jay Gruden should bear the weight of that.
Jay, we have plenty of time to get into roster moves in the coming weeks, and it will be interesting to see how Gruden's hire sort of affects that. I want to talk more about the coaching staff, though, and I want to ask you about Haslett. We talked about this a couple weeks ago when initially everybody was fired. He was retained, and we asked what the motivation for that was and whether or not the new head coach would keep him. Obviously, they have a relationship. Does anything strike you as surprising about Haslett going forward? Do you expect him to be defensive coordinator next year?
No, he's the defensive coordinator. I mean, that's his job. And, my whole thing about Haslett has been, is he the greatest defensive coordinator in history of defensive coordinators? No, probably not. But if you don't give a guy the parts to work with to build the machine correctly, how can you expect the machine to work? I mean, now, has wanted O.J. Atogwe. That was on him. That didn't work out. But there have been so many other moves. I mean, the first year, they're plugging in guys like what was the big nose Kimatu? Who had blown out his Achilles and couldn't really play anymore. They're forcing Albert Hainsworth to go from a 3 technique, which is what he wants to be, to a nose in a 3-4, which is what he doesn't want to be. They're getting Andre Carter to stand up when he's been a hand down 4-3 his whole life. So and then from there it just kept spiraling. They never truly addressed it. I mean, they did a better job when they drafted Kerrigan, but they never truly addressed it. So a lot of Redskins fans just hate Haslett. I mean, the email I get about it, I just think is ridiculous because, look, Haslett is a competent coach, and if you give him the parts to work with, I think that they can be a better team. I'm still not sure they're a 3-4 defense, though. For me, they're going to have to blow this thing up in the secondary, and the defensive front, after 4 years, you still don't have those types of animals that you need up there. If you're going to run an effective 3-4, you need beasts. You need just guys that will tear down buildings. And they still don't have that in their front. So I don't know if they're a 3-4 defense, but I do know this. Jim Haslett's the defensive coordinator, and he'll move forward with Jay Gruden, and they'll determine what's best for the team.
Dan, does keeping Jim Haslett in that role make sense for the team?
You know what my concern would be? Like, is he the worst defensive coordinator in the world? No. Is he the best? No. Whatever. He's a defensive coordinator. But it seems like a primary, at least one of the reasons that he is retained is for financial reasons.
Right.
Because he's under contract. And I think that when you're starting over and when you're saying to the fans, wow, we really blew it last year and we really gave you a disastrous product, I think that maybe at that point, your own financial interests in keeping the coaching staff should not be primary. And I think that if Jay Gruden decides this is the guy that he wants more than anyone else in the world, that's why he should be defensive coordinator.
And I think they have a relationship.
They have a relationship.
Yeah, but I think it's also a matter. I think both points are valid. Mm-hmm. I still think it comes back to, was Jim Haslett in a fair position to win, to prosper?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people who were close to the situation would say that he probably was not in the best of situations to succeed. I mean, when you have a head coach that is throwing themselves into the mix of play calling and different things like that, I honestly, look, if that's not your role, don't do it.
We're adding an extra minute for you. So
it's all right. I just, for me, I really think that it kind of goes back to my first answer, is that you need a head coach that's going to be more of a figurehead than a coach. I've always heard that the greatest head coaches were coaches that assembled the greatest coaching staffs. So even though I hear that Jay Gruden is going to call plays on offense, which is fine, but you still have to understand there has to be clear lines of what what your marching orders are going to be. It can't be so much so where it's an ironclad fist that there is no leniency, there is no ability for creativity. I think giving Jim Haslett an opportunity under a coaching regime that I would assume he's much more comfortable with could be the difference. It could be the difference for everybody, people might not realize how much they were being controlled until they move forward under this new deal. Yeah.
Let's go to the offensive side of the coaching staff. And Jason, I want to ask about McVeigh's role going forward and whether or not you expect him to be offensive coordinator.
Well, he is the offensive. I mean, they haven't announced it.
Right. So you expect that to be announced. Yeah. And then do you see that as a good thing to keep that consistent thread in the relationship for Robert Griffin III?
Well, yeah. I mean, a couple of points. I met Sean McVeigh like 4 years ago at the scouting combine at a late night dinner with a bunch of people. And I turned to somebody who was at the table and I said, "Who is this kid? I mean, you're a very sharp kid." He said, well, his grandfather was a former 49ers GM, and he's in Redskins going to hire him. I'm like, wow, this kid's really bright. And then you get to know the kid a little bit as he's working with the Redskins. He was involved with the third down install with the offensive this year. Now Kyle Shanahan had to check off on it, but McVeigh was the one who put it together. They needed to retain someone from this coaching staff, from the offensive side, to work with Robert because look. They all know that Robert has limitations in terms of reading defenses. And they all know Robert has limitations in terms of pocket presence. Now, he'll work hard, and he's an incredible athlete, and he'll get the brace off. So what you hope is you have some continuity with that staff, and a guy who knows his strengths and weaknesses will be able to help Gruden. I mean, they had to retain somebody. Sure as heck wasn't going to be Kyle, but they had to retain somebody. Now, Gruden and McVeigh go back and they're friends. I never thought that Gruden would let McVeigh call the plays. He's 27 years old. I mean, if it doesn't work out, he would have the whole organization would have been shredded. What he'll do is he'll be involved with the whole install, and he will be the guy who really gives Gruden the insight he's going to need to be like, okay, this is a play Robert would do well. This is a game plan that we're setting up for Robert. So I think McVeigh is going to be essential. If Robert Griffin III is going to get turned around, Sean McVeigh is going to have a big part of helping that happen.
Dan, on McVeigh, I mean, I haven't heard a bad thing said about the guy, so I think it's is widely accepted that this is a good move.
I think anyone's concern would be inexperience.
Right.
And I mean, it's the same thing that we heard with Kyle Shanahan for years. He is directing professionals who are considerably older than him, and that's going to be even more the case with McVeigh. But, when you hear people like Logan Paulson, Niles Paul, Chris Cooley, the guys who actually worked under McVeigh, they could not be more complimentary. So I don't know if there's a lot of complaints, but it's also, it's so hard to say what's going to happen. We have so little idea of what kind of stuff they want to run.
LaVar, on the offensive
side, young would be good. I think young, inexperienced could be good.
Yeah?
Yeah, break up the monotony. Everybody, I think sometimes stating experience is kind of,
can be overrated.
I mean, look at what experience has gotten this team.
Right?
I mean,
4 years.
Well, look at what experience got them this year in their record, 3 wins. So sometimes it's just maybe it's better to go a different direction.
And I don't know if we're done with this.
Yeah, make it quick in 15 seconds or so.
If you have so much to say in the future, you should get here a little earlier. We can have a little more time to talk.
Zing.
We'll talk to the Secret Service. Talk to the DC Police, okay?
30 seconds.
As I look at this situation right now with this team, Jay Gruden made it very clear right off the bat that Robert Griffin III is our quarterback. Even though McVeigh is a bright young coach, part of the reason he was kept around is continuity with Robert Griffin III. What this organization has made clear is that getting Robert Griffin III right, or as right as he can be, is their number one priority.
Sure.
So I look at the Gruden McVeigh thing as like you have two guys now who are all in on getting this kid in a comfortable spot is all what we're about.
And that makes sense for everyone.
You all right? Shot clock violation?
What's that? Shot clock violation? No, that's
they put 30 seconds.
Ineligible receiver
downfield.
What's shot clock violation?
It wasn't that.
I don't know. All right. Let's move on to bowl predictions, guys. This weekend we got a couple great games. Quick recap of last week. We were all way off. Although, Dan, you hit one of them. You thought both road teams would win in the NFC. Niners obviously did that. Saints did not. We all picked picked wrong. Wise actually had the most interesting prediction, which was Brady throwing 6 touchdowns.
He was close.
They did score 6, but he threw 0. So the other ones were just generally wrong. LaVar, San Diego, and me saying the Colts over the Pats. All right, so give me something this week. LaVar, I'll start with you on a bold prediction. We'll go down the line. Give me something for championship weekend.
I mean, is it bold to say that San Francisco will win in Seattle?
That's bold.
I
Is
like
that bold?
Yeah, that is
Then
bold.
I'll say that.
What is the line on that? It's got to be, what, 8 or 9 points? Is it
Well, I
that
don't
high?
think it would be
No,
that
it's
big.
not that high.
Is it?
I think
No.
6.
6?
Yeah. 5.5,
That's high
6,
even.
something like
That's a lot of points to give San Fran.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm not even sure if that's right. But no, it's lower than that. It's
Is it lower?
than
Yeah,
it's lower than
that makes more sense. What was I thinking, 8 or 9?
I think the Broncos are favored by like 6 over the Patriots.
Okay.
I think the other one's like 3.5.
So you like San Fran on the road?
And I like New England. So I'll take both road teams this
Oh, all
week.
right,
How
all
about
right.
that? I'll take both road teams.
Dan, give me something.
Ready? I don't know if this is bold either.
Ready?
The winner of the AFC Championship game will score more points than both teams in the NFC Championship game combined.
That's
That's creative. I like
Oh,
Dan.
yeah.
Dan thinks about this stuff
That
in
was
advance. I like that.
Oh,
No. That's not a shot on
That
you.
was a good one. I don't even listen to the dirty man over here.
Yeah, that's a good one, all right?
Yes, go ahead.
That was a good one.
My prediction is that Peyton Manning will outduel Tom Brady and get back to the Super Bowl. That's my AFC one. My NFC one is that the Seattle Seahawks will make Colin Kaepernick and the 49ers realize that their season is over.
So you're
Realize
saying they're
that
going to
they're
lose.
So in other words, Seattle wins.
I believe Seattle wins that game.
So you got two home teams. You've got the one road team with the 49ers.
I got 2 away teams. I'll take both away teams to win.
Both away teams, okay.
I'm going to go with, I like the Broncos also to beat the Pats, but I like them to come back from a double-digit deficit to do so. So it seems like the two,
Just
that's
like
how
they
they
did
go.
against the Redskins.
Just like they did against the Redskins in Denver. New England, as you'll recall, came back from like 24 down to beat the Broncos earlier this year. I see it similar, but reverse.
Oh, that was a whole
reversal
lot of thought
fortunes.
on Jonathan's part. I tell you what, boy, was that a good one.
It is a little bit out there. All right, I deserve that. All right, let's go on to the Wizards, guys. Big win for the team in Chicago last night. Nene back in the starting lineup. Jason, my question before they faced the Heat on Wednesday night, but I want to sort of keep this focused on Nene and his importance to the team. How does Randy Whitman, or how should he go about maximizing his productivity, but also keeping him healthy for the stretch run with a team that really has a shot at the playoffs?
Well, I mean, I guess you do what you're doing with him. Bring him off the bench, you limit his minutes. I mean, you know, it's unfortunate you're paying a guy $13 million a year, and you got to bring him off the bench and limit his minutes. But that's the reality. And you know, when he plays, they are a different team. You know, I think he's just got to keep doing what he's doing. I mean, because if the guy can't be on the court at all, you know, do they make the playoffs? I don't know. So you got to try to keep him out there as much as possible.
I think Trevor Booker essentially replaced him in the starting lineup, and I think that they were
Booker's played well.
7-9 though with Booker in the starting lineup, which is, you know, it's still a pace that probably gets you in the playoffs, but it's not a pace that lets you say, hey, this was a successful season. They need Nene. You know, they're going to an 8-man rotation in a early or to mid-January game. It shows you how important they consider that game last night, and I think they did that once before, really shortening the bench. You would hope that they wouldn't be so desperate to get a win. But, you know, I think that to me it comes down to less about limiting the minutes and that stuff and more about, is he going to be out for a 10 or 12 game stretch at some point? And if he is, can they weather that? I have to assume that he will be at some point, because that's his history. And can they, you know, weather that and rack up enough wins while he's healthy to still get one of those 4 or 5 seeds? I think that's kind of the crucial thing.
Yeah, if they can stay at that 500 level without him, by all means. I mean, and Booker's played well, but I don't know if that can happen for an extended period. LaVar, how should Whitman handle this?
I've been saying Nene the whole entire season, like even before it got started. He's the key. He's the linchpin, so to speak. How should you handle it? I think you got to handle it as well as possible. You can't sacrifice or forfeit your season being held hostage by when will he go down, because I think it is a matter of time before he gets it. It's not a military secret. Mm-hmm. That's, as Dan said, he gets hurt. So I think it's kind of the opposite, to be honest with you. You want to try to handle him with as much care as possible, but you have a season and you have to play. And so you manage his minutes the same way you manage anybody else who deals with injuries, but you have to have somebody step up. Somebody else has to step up and try to be that presence down low. Otherwise, I don't think that they can be a competitive team without him. I don't see any other players on this team that has the ability to impact the game as much as Nene does when he's out there on the court.
I'll tell you, I mean, the other weirdest thing about this team, I don't know where you want to go, but they just can't beat good teams still. Their record against above 500 teams.
They're not a good team.
Right,
and I love Whitman,
which is a step up from where they've been.
But if that's the case, I think they're at least doing a great job of beating the teams that are worse than them.
Well,
look, they've won 7 and 9 on the road. You can't control who the schedule puts out there. Winning road games in any league is important.
I don't think that's a shot. Just so we're clear, I'm a Wizards fan. I just don't think that they're a good team.
Speaking of good teams, they'll be hosting Miami on Wednesday night. Are you going to be courtside for that?
I won't be courtside.
You'll be there?
I'm going to broadcast from there. I doubt I'll stay for the game.
Oh, right on.
Right on.
Anything to look into the Miami
they're in the
game
same
at all?
division. It's not like it's some
Just don't
magical.
They play well
is this a barometer?
Miami.
Do you expect them to give them a game? Miami's lost 2 in a row.
They play well against Miami. I expect them to give them a game.
Yeah, I would think so too.
All right. In the phone booth. All right. As long as there's no leaks. Jason, any final thoughts?
On this topic?
On anything. Whatever you want, man.
My final thought would be about the Redskins. And as we look at the, are we doing final thoughts?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I was just
my final thought would be on the Redskins, just that, Jay Gruden clearly is a guy who has credentials, clearly is a guy who has, made some things happen, and guy who has personality. And you think to yourself, it's a good hire, but you also think to yourself, dude has no idea what he got himself into.
Well, that's fair.
Only time will tell.
Absolutely.
Time will tell.
Sometimes ignorance.
You said what he said. What he said.
You want to hear my final thought? Sometimes ignorance. Quickly.
You don't hear what's in my ear. I'm getting barked at.
I thought we were doing final thoughts.
Okay. Sometimes ignorance is bliss. I'd be honest with you. I think whether it be with McVeigh, whether it be with Gruden, come in here with no preconceived notions.
Yeah.
Do your job with no super prior experience.
Yeah.
Sometimes those make for the best employees.
They've tried everything else. We'll see what works this way. We'll see. All right. For Jason Reid, Dan Steinberg, LaVar Arrington, thanks for sticking with us and for waiting through the delay with us. We'll see you next Tuesday on Post Sports Live.
I don't know why everyone says they've tried everything else.